Welcome to the Unearthed Man podcast, the journey to becoming a conscious man, hosted by Milvo. Hey all, Milvo here and welcome to episode 44 of the Unearthed Man podcast. To kick off, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we work and gather, and their continuing connection to land and waters. I pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. I pay tribute to the diversity of First Nations peoples of Australia and their ongoing culture. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, then welcome aboard. If you're one of my regular listeners, then welcome back. I really appreciate your ongoing support. So if you're looking to know more about the Unearthed Man, then you can find me on Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn. I really enjoyed the chat and connection with my cousin Tom last week. It brought up a lot of emotion for me given the relationship that I had with his dad, Pat. It's been wonderful seeing Tom move beyond the alcohol and drugs, and I feel privileged that I was there at the start of his journey and transformation. I'm looking forward to witnessing him grow over the coming years. I first met my guest today during Unleash the Beast in 2019, and post then I remained in contact with him via social media. I recently caught up with him and a previous guest, Steve Capp, who suggested that part of that we get my guest on to have a good chat about the podcast. I did this without hesitation because I know that he's got such an amazing story and he's been on a fantastic journey. So I'm really glad that we've reached out. So my guest was born in Queensland, Australia, where he lived as a beach kid before moving to Brisbane when he was 13. He experienced his father getting lung cancer, his parents separating, and the loss of his father shortly after. This led him down an unconsciously traumatised path of addiction for many years. That all changed when he overdosed. He then moved to Central Australia to change his life and learn more about the land, or what the mobs call country. He pursued his dream career as a tattoo artist and street artist and spent time healing, learning and exploring his edge and what it means to be a conscious man in this current world. Welcome to the Unearthed Man podcast, Hayden Williams. Hey Hayden, how are you, buddy?
Hey Milvo, how you doing?
Mate,
Thanks for having me, mate.
Oh mate, it's an absolute pleasure. Pleasure to have you on board. As I said, I've watched from a bit of a journey, and as I indicated, like Steve and I sort of caught up, and he's like, I keep in regular contact with Hayden because we're talking about who we keep in contact with. I'm like, yeah, he's on my list to get on the podcast. He says, you got to do it, man. So I'm so glad that we've connected and you've agreed to come on. So
thanks for reaching out. Yeah.
Look, it's absolutely my pleasure. So, let's go back to, which is nearly 2 years ago now, Unleash the Beast, where we met. I know a number of my guests have come from that forum, but that's because, there's just 50 amazing men in that room, and the energy and the buzz. I mean, it's well documented now on my podcast, what I got out of it. What was that weekend like for you before we sort of go back into previous to that weekend? What was that like for you to be involved in Unleash the Beast?
Yeah. Unleash, I was just reflecting on it before I jumped on this call. And yeah, I guess for me, it was the first in-person men's work, deep sort of diving. And from memory, I think there was 100 men there. For me, it was very confronting to be in circle with so many men and really, really powerful and shifted my whole perspective really. To see men coming together, because I also grew up in Brisbane and Unleash was in Brisbane.
Yep.
And so it was really, it really shifted my perspective to see how many men are actually willing to do the work, how many men are willing to show up, and just really get some insight into what, men have been going through around me. Because it's like, you walk past men on the street, you like I've had surface relationships with men. Yep. I would say now friendships that we haven't really known how to navigate those waters, those depths. And for me, that's what it really introduced me to during Unleash the Beast. Yeah. And like you said, connecting to so many powerful men, and I've stayed connected, and all those men pop up in different ways, whether it's on social media or, podcasts, I'll hear those men and I see them now taking action, and it's really, taking positive action in their life. So, it's quite incredible.
I would agree. I think that's my sentiments on that exactly. One, to see so many men actually just say, you know what, I'm going to turn up and I'm going to be completely vulnerable. I'm going to put it out on the
Mm.
table. There's no masks. There's no hiding. I mean, there was guys that I know who turned up at the start of the event were like, I'm only here because my wife told me that I had to come. Who had no interest in doing anything. And at the
Yeah.
end, like these were the guys that were in tears and were actually like had completely transformed their life, to others that go, you know, like this is my last bastion. Like I've got to do something about my life because, you know, this is what it
Yeah.
is. And then you're right. Like a lot of the guys that I've had on the podcast, but I've say connected to, the conversations aren't surface level anymore. Like, you know,
Mm.
our great friend Steve Cap, like Steve gets on, he goes, like when he says, "How are you going?" It's like if you come back and go, "Yeah, I'm okay," he'll go, "No, fuck off." Like, no.
Yeah.
Emotionally, spiritually, like, how are you going? Like, are you really feeling heavy? I like the conversation is really different, and that's what I love.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and I know you're jumping on the calls with us as well now, and it's
Yeah.
so great to have those proper conversations.
Yeah. Actually, yeah. Looking beneath the surface, and a willingness to do that. And I think it takes a level of resilience and a new level of courage for us to do that, and to know that's okay. To know that deeper connection is actually the medicine we'll need as
Mm,
well.
yeah.
So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to staying connected to those calls
Oh, look,
with you
yeah.
both as well. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that I've taken away from this is I was a lone wolf. Right. I had my
Mm,
mates, but a couple of mates, but effectively you were doing everything on your own.
mhm.
I now know that I'm one text message, one Instagram message, one phone call away from 30 or 40 men who go, dude, have you got 10 minutes for me? I really need to chat. And
Yep,
any one of those men who go, fuck yeah, bro, like I'm in. Like, and they would pretty much
absolutely.
drop what's happening in their life. And it wouldn't be like, you know, oh, you know, poor victim me. They'd be like, no. What's happening, buddy? What can we do? Where you're at with your life? And to have those connections is just so great. Like, you know, it's just so heartwarming, and, you know, you just really feels deep, you know, inside you, that it's such an amazing thing to have taken place with.
Absolutely. And I think you know, it's a reflection of our own willingness to step into that vulnerability and expand in that way, expand our relationships. And it's amazing how we're met. We're always met with the level we're willing to go to in
Mm,
relationships. And I think we are rewriting and rebuilding the culture of men in Australia. Like I think we're a pretty young culture here, and I think it is sort of early days as well when you look at the big scheme of the world. But I think tapping into different currents and cultures around the world is really helping us. Um, yeah, to really go there, to go to those
yeah.
new realms of connection.
Yeah.
So
I would absolutely agree. So what I want to do is take a step back now, man. So obviously
yeah,
in the bio that we talked about, you know, age of 13, you go to Brisbane. Your dad, I think we talked about, you know, basically had cancer, lung cancer. You know, you passed
yeah,
away, so your parents separate, pass away. You know, that's pretty tough at a young age. And then, as you said, you know, then there's a number of I suppose, addictions and overdose come off the back of that. So, do
yeah.
you mind taking us back on that journey and talking through, you know, what that looked like for you, and, you know, how you ended up out in basically beautiful Central Australia?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I guess it's a pretty big deep dive, hey, into that
Yeah.
stuff. Looking back from where I'm standing now, quite a different life. And yeah, I think for me, what's been coming up as I reflect on my younger days is, the importance of relationships and the importance of tribe,
Mm.
and that primarily starting with, my relationship to my mother and father, of course, and how crucial they were in teaching me how to connect and relate to people, primarily. And I think, my mum and my dad had their own traumas, and that's been a lot of my work in the recent years, is really finding that empathy and understanding that they had their own traumas, and it was it's a generational thing. And so my experience of that when I was younger is my dad drank a lot. He didn't really express himself until he was drinking. And my mother was quite absent, I felt, emotionally in my life. And I've done a lot of work recently around my union of my divine mother and divine father.
Right.
And as I look back and I see a lot of it came from not having a lot of the disruption to me emotionally came from not having a strong connection with my mother. And that really, what that looked like, I think, is not having a healthy inner dialogue, and not feeling supported, when I was young. Although my parents, they were great, very proficient artists, and I do remember very fond memories of going to the beach and, doing family holidays together and things like that. So, I think it's important to try to keep a clear perspective and well-rounded.
Yeah.
So, I think my dad's father passed away when he was quite young. I think my dad was about 7 years old.
Okay.
So as I as I grew up, I felt my dad sort of not knowing how to go there, not knowing how to express himself, starting to drink more. That I think the alcohol was a big part, and the probably childhood trauma with my parents, and that led to them separating, basically. And at the same time as they separated, my dad actually got diagnosed with lung cancer. So it was all around the same time, and I was about 14 or 15 years old. And so, I think there was a real lack of safety for me when I was a boy. During those times, there was a lot of uncertainty, and there was very little support during those years. And so I think, I had some self-worth issues, some real inner dialogue, my mind, looking at myself in the mirror, judging myself, and not having that, motherly love, that really deep motherly love. So that I think from there I operated from a lack, a lack of worth. And I navigated relationships in that way. I ended up in a long-term relationship with a beautiful woman, and I think I was, we had a great relationship, but I think the core wound is what I was trying to heal. I was seeking that motherly love from a partner, and that would constantly lead me back to the same place, of the unhealed, and not having a strong father figure to show me, hey, expressing yourself is healthy, and it's a really important part of connection and relating. So from that place, alcohol for me, I leant towards alcohol because it numbed my emotions. It sort of depressed me. It allowed me to just get by, just sort of fly. Just get through life, really, and maintain, and probably just repress those parts of myself. And I was a mechanic. I left school quite early. I think I was about 16, and I dropped out of school. And I spent a few years sort of navigating a path, and found light vehicle mechanics, and became a mechanic. So I did that for 4 years. And when I was about 20, my my dad really was a hard worker, and he would, he would motivate me to go to work and you know, take action daily on actually. So I've got a good work ethic from my father, which I'm really grateful for. And yeah, so probably about when I was 20 or 19, I was introduced to harder drugs. It went from sort of alcohol to, I was doing pills when I was younger, and I was doing things like that. And then, it went to amphetamines and harder drugs. So the alcohol mixed with that alongside the trauma that I was unconscious of, really let me down a path of self-destruction.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. So that's sort of, and I spent some years. So actually, I was into crime. I was quite violent as well.
Yeah. Okay.
I thought anger to me was the safest way to express myself as a man. And I was very much a lone wolf, like you're saying, in that way, because I had lots of friends. I had lots of, my bros, and my bros were my family, when I was living in public housing, and wasn't doing quite well financially. So that brought me into contact with a lot of people that were sort of into crime, into dealing drugs and things like that.
Yeah.
And so, I sort of walked that path unconsciously then. It was probably about 3 years of really walking that path, and it really impacted my relationships in a bad way, including the one with myself. There was many times I ended up in hospital.
Okay.
Mainly from just using too much drugs, and being in some very shady situations, where I could have lost my life to violence and things like that. And it ultimately finished. It ultimately was triggered at the end by I sort of used too much drugs for too long, and I had a blood clot form on the left side of my body, which was basically like a stroke, while I was sleeping. And I lost most of the feeling in my left-hand side.
Oh, wow.
And
that's going to be scary.
And that was very, very scary. And I knew at that stage I knew I had to take action, I knew that was a massive message for me that, hey, where you're at is not the right place. And that was while I was in Brisbane. And I ended up separating from my girlfriend. That relationship was falling apart because, obviously I wasn't emotionally available. I wasn't expressive. All these, I look back now and I'm like, upon reflection, it's quite easy, but all the numbing and I think, and it brings me back to that first piece as well around relationships. I didn't have that tribe of friends, family around me, really holding me, really supporting me, and teaching me resilience. Like my nervous system hadn't been properly nourished as a child. My body hadn't, I hadn't got enough contact nourishment as a child as well.
Yeah,
there were different abandonment wounds that were embedded at quite a young age, as my parents were drinking and things like that. So I guess those early years formed me formed my nervous system in a way that life was familiar.
yes.
and that only led to, that stroke basically happening. And it was like, okay, now I have to find a whole new way of living, basically. And that was scary. That was something that I'd known that I had to do for quite a while, I think, deep down.
Yes.
And I just like bought myself time. I don't know how to do this. I'm just going to drink again. I'm just going to, do some more drugs, or, uh, have sex or whatever, anything to get that bit of dopamine, I think, to not face reality. And when I moved to Central Australia, that was really like picking me up out of that. I would say it was almost a toxic soup at that point that I'd created, picking myself up out of that and putting myself in some fresh water.
Mm-hmm.
And, I quit smoking, I quit drinking. And actually I realized the other day, one of the first things I did is start running. Okay. And it's funny because I've been ultra marathon running now. I've just done an ultra marathon not long ago, and I realized running was actually a big part of my medicine. So being on new land, being around new relationships, and being able to start fresh, for me, that really gave me opportunity. It gave me a new shot at life. And on top of that, to connect with the Indigenous people in Central Australia, and actually get a look at what's really been going on in Australia, to really see through all the conditioning that they give us in schools, the lack of information in schools, and be able to, I think experiencing the Indigenous culture here taught me about family again.
Okay. Yeah.
It taught me that, that just being on community in Central Australia, I was able to see, how families operate when they're really together, when they're really bonded. And that was really, really real medicine for me. And I would say I spent a few years just really learning how to hunt and learning how to ride motorbikes, and tapping into that inner boy again, and that country kid, which I was as well. I grew up in the beach, but I was also, we had a block of land. So I feel like that connection to land was really reignited when I came here. And that's been a really big part of my healing process as well, is just having the space. And I think that took me a few years to really, I took some really massive job offers here, and pushed my edges. I was a civil construction team leader with an Indigenous team. I was a qualified mechanic at that point, and I guess I was trading my skills, but I was learning culture at the same time, learning how to track, learning how to hunt, and what came with that is really having to let go completely of all these old relationships that I had. And that was really heartbreaking. That was, for many years I thought I had all these friends, and some of them I do still have. But it was a real process of letting go, because the addiction to drugs and alcohol and all those things sort of envelopes the relationship sometimes.
Yes.
And for me, that was a crucial part. And I could see now, looking back, that it was actually more about the relationships and the people, and who they are and what values they live by, that really influenced me in a lot of ways to walk down those paths that I did. So I think that's
awesome, man. Appreciate that. That's a really good journey. And my apologies to anyone that can hear the dog barking in the background. I'm home on my own, and I think there's someone at our front door, so we just going to put up with the barking dog. Look, thank you, man. Look, there's a couple of things in there that I really want to just pick up on.
Absolutely.
In detail, but one of the things that I did actually pick up on, funny enough, was my conversation with which I alluded to at the front, with my cousin Tom, who immediately after the death of my uncle, his dad, gave up alcohol basically that was it. Went sober from that day, and he'd had a big drug, alcohol as well. He turned to running. And like people were going, so what are you doing to heal? He goes, I run 22 kilometers every day. And they're like, that's too hard for me, sort of thing. So it's a really interesting thing that linkage is between last week and this week about, like finding that other thing to actually turn to, which is going from something that's taking away from my life to something that's adding to my life. Now, it doesn't matter whether that just changed the level of addiction or escapism. It doesn't make any difference, but you've gone from a non-value add to a value add thing that's actually done that. So I really loved it. Like you've gone, I just started to run. It was like, I was out there. It was just my way to do something. So that was really awesome. Which I love. I want to get back. You touched a couple of times on the word dialogue. And I think you've talked through, both dialogue and then you talked about relationship. And I think we talk about our external relationships, with the friends that we had, whether they be, the ones you drank with or the ones you did drugs with or, and family and everything else. But then for me, picking up on those two terms, dialogue and relationship is like the relationship you're having with yourself, and so what was that relationship through that dialogue that you used to have versus where's that relationship and that dialogue now? And what does that look like for you now?
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome question. I think it's a work in progress still. Even to this day, I'm pushing edges and I'm, revealing these parts of myself that I haven't learned to love yet. And that's where I think the dialogue, is just so profound and so useful. And I think back in the day, the dialogue was, I think a lot of my inner dialogue was probably forged. Probably actually things like you look fat, you look, you don't look attractive, you've got freckles, you've got weird teeth, all these things like superficial judgments, and that sort of was coming from a core place of like, you're not lovable, you're not, and I think these primary dialogues, I think they came from my youth. So when I was very young, when I would get upset and I would have a tantrum, my parents would lock me, or they would basically put me in my room and say, don't come out until you've finished.
Yep.
And for me, that was a really core trauma, I believe, looking back. And in those moments, my dialogue, I believe, was, I'm too much. This is too much for people. This is too much for them. I'm not lovable. It's not okay to feel emotions and express emotions. Mm-hmm. And so I think in different ways, those experiences created those sorts of dialogues for me. And only through really living out and proving, creating a new reality, really have I been able to slowly transition those dialogues. It's like, taking on a job that really scares me and listening to those dialogues in my head, sitting with it, and then actually like either writing out new ones or consciously telling myself a new dialogue, like I am love, I am love, I'm perfect just as I am. Like everyone makes mistakes, all these little things that are so important. It's okay to be a mess. Like, so, and it's even to this day, I'm doing that. Yesterday I went and I've become a community ambassador for Freedom Keepers here in Central Australia. And it's like, I went and spoke to a room full of people. And even in those moments, my nervous system freaks out and I feel those dialogues igniting. And it's like, it's just, I guess, forming a new relationship with my nervous system and, and reminding myself it's okay. It's okay. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how I look. I guess that's where the perfectionist comes from as well, that sort of dialogue as well. So, I think, you touched on something before, and I actually didn't even bring up my father passing away, but it's interesting you talking about, was it your cousin?
Yeah. So basically my cousin. So yeah, I had a spiritual connection with his dad. His dad, and on the podcast last week, his dad was by no means a saint. Like, he got brought up in he lived with ancestral trauma, like alcoholic parents. His dad would abuse, like, so my grandfather would, physically, domestic violence. My mum got brought up in that. My mum suffers from alcoholism now.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, my mum's nearly on the verge of getting towards 80, like, so she's lived a great life. And so we just go, Mum, drink all you want. We don't care anymore. Like, but yeah, so we talked about that, and, the death of his dad. So my uncle, he was in palliative care. So we both were able to fly in, and pretty much for us to meet and connect, which was beautiful. And for him to see his dad, in that state. And then, Tom made that choice because Tom was like working on pearl farms up in the Kimberleys. So basically 2 weeks working up there. And then the next third week was in Bali, just getting smashed. Flying back in, working 2 weeks, going to Bali, like 28 weeks he's off in Bali. So he had this life, and he turned up and goes, more of a profound experience from his dad passing away. That he's like, hey, I can make a choice here in life, and what's the message my dad's giving to me through his passing as an alcoholic who's pretty much destroyed his body and destroyed part of his family. What can I take from that from a positive? And that was a really, really good thing for him to be able to do. And it was a great chat for us to talk through that.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I think like when you talked about running and the post, like dealing with grief and choosing to run, I look at my ultra marathon that I did, and I can see in lots of ways, as I'm still overcoming addiction, I'm still, healing from that and healing the trauma. It's like the running can become an aversion instead of an addiction. And I'm still catching myself in these little aversions. It's my ego trying to just like take control and exert it in a healthier way, but ultimately not go deeply into the core and like really feel that and really create space for that that grieving. And a lady the other night actually called it lamenting, and I've never heard that word before. But it's sort of like a deep process of grief, the word lament. And, I think collectively we've forgotten how to really grieve in our culture and how to create space for grief. And going back to my story just a little bit, I think that was a big part, because my dad died when I was 20, and it was after that I really went into more self-destructive ways of living. And it was the grief. It was deeply rooted grief that I hadn't properly felt yet. Just a fear, just an unwillingness to really go there. And that's what I love about men's work. It's actually changed my life. It's the reason why I'm sitting here, and I'm not addicted to alcohol. I'm not addicted to drugs. I believe that those core relationships and those experiences shifted something within me. It really reconnected me to men, to the father, and to myself in that process. And so I'm trying to run in a way that I'm not, I'm trying to have empathy and compassion now when I'm running for myself and not sort of, checking in with myself on that journey as well, because I also am conscious I don't want it to become an aversion, an addiction, and a way to hide as well. So it's quite interesting that you brought that up. Yeah.
I love the fact that you actually talked into that because what popped into me was I gave up drinking 2002, 2003. I then ran a marathon in 2007. And the mindset in my mind when I ran a marathon was that once I finished the marathon, I'm no longer addicted. Like, I have cured my addiction to alcohol.
Yeah.
When I finished running the marathon, I was still a sober alcoholic, right?
Yeah.
So so that whole story is about the fact that what I hadn't actually done is I hadn't grieved the death of that part of my ego. So that was the key change for me that popped up when you're talking about that, is what I turned to the running to go, if I can run a marathon, I've cured myself. I'm now cured, right?
Yeah.
What I didn't actually do is say, no, what this is going to do is help me go through a grieving process of this egoic addiction that I had to alcohol that I no longer have anymore. I'm actually going to do that. And as an aside story, I ran the marathon. I then went and actually did a corporate workshop, actually, and there was a psychologist there, and we got to spend 45 minutes with him. And I said, hey, look, just out of interest, how do I get, like, I feel embarrassed telling people I don't drink anymore, and how do I tell them that I'm an alcoholic without them thinking I'm the bum on the park bench with the brown paper bag? And his response is, he goes, but you are the bum on the park bench with a brown paper bag. He said, you are that alcoholic. He goes, you just haven't accepted the fact that that's part of your personality.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and he's like, fucking spang, right in the face. And then when I thought about that, I'm like, yeah, actually. And from then on, I could then talk about the fact that, yes, I would tell people I don't drink. I'm an alcoholic. This is what I don't do anymore. But even now I'm learning that the labeling of myself, calling me that, is actually saying, hey, look over here. I'm a victim because I'm this sober alcoholic. I can still play the victim role, where it's like, dude, I just don't drink. Like, okay, I made a choice. Like, I've moved on. I've moved away from the aversion, the escapism that I was doing. I've accepted the shadow parts of my life, and rather than finding a vice to escape from them, I now actually go, whew, fuck, that's interesting. Maybe we need to spend a bit more time over here looking at this one here, right? And you're actually, embracing every one of those, as you said, those little elements that are still popping up for you as well, like as they come up, those little aversions or those things. I now don't resist them. I actually go, okay. So this is one that's popped up for me, right? Now what do I need to do? And let's walk into this one and let's have some fun over here. And it's just that, a complete different mindset now, which means you don't need to escape anymore. You don't need that substance. You don't need that vice anymore, because in fact, the shadow work becomes the aversion. It actually becomes the fun piece if you wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think the mind will find juice in the most what's the word? In the most cunning ways. Even in the language we talk, and to really sit and create that space to reflect on what we're saying and why we're saying it, and how, what our ego is getting the juice from. And I think the core feeling going through those processes, like I witnessed you do, at Unleash the Beast, it's like going through those really deep processes is like, oh, that's what love feels like. Like that's what that core essence of connection feels like. And that's, I think, creates those reference points even more, right? So we can sit there and reflect and go, I see you. I see you trying to get the juice from this situation. Or I see you trying to run away, which is totally what you can get caught up with running.
The one thing I love about these conversations is that, nuggets drop in. And the one thing that just dropped in for me then was, we seek love in our lives, but it's often conditional. Like we say, but love me for who I am, love me for this, love me for that, right? Which is putting conditions. When that workshop that we did, the Unleash the Beast, that was 100% unconditional love. When I now reflect back, what took place in that room, there was, from the moment every man was in that room, everyone else handed out, because no one gave a fuck what your background is. We don't care about your story. We don't care about what happened to you. We just love you here. And guess what? We just love you for who you are, and you're here, and we're here to support everybody. And I think when I look back, what transformed me or lifted my spirit or ego up about is the fact that for the first time, probably that I can remember, I actually felt true unconditional love from men. and that
man.
masculine energy, and that's phenomenal. And that's, to a degree, that's what, now knowing that, and once that's touched into your heart, you can't actually lose that. And it becomes easy to start to hand that out to others. You go, if I can feel so good from that, like if I'm putting that out all the time, how good's this place going to be? And, and I think that's another learning that that's why I like having these chats, because you go, oh shit, that's right. That's probably what took place,
All those gems drop in. Hey.
Yeah, exactly.
And those imprints, they never go away. Like you said, like when they're that profound and they're felt on such a vast level, like at that depth, it's like, I think it's important, especially for men at a young age, to have that. Imagine the life we would have lived if we've had that at a young age, all the way even through our childhood. So, that's why we do this work. Yeah,
absolutely. All right, so I want to move. So you've picked yourself up. You've had your semi-stroke. You've now gone, cool, I'm landing myself in Central Australia. You've turned up. You said you're like doing some civil construction. You were doing, the mechanic, work, but you're now a tattoo artist. And you got some amazing tattoos on you. And I've seen some of your work, which is just clearly phenomenal. And clearly there's, you have some connection into that. So, and you talked earlier about your parents having an artistic bent. Yeah. Talked earlier. So how did you go? Like, what was that transition look like? Because earlier before we recorded this, you talked about the fact of, I'm okay regardless of what decisions the government's making, because I've actually set myself up now to be self-sufficient, empowered, know who I am. So can we talk through how that's from a mechanic in Alice Springs, Central Australia, to this journey that you've now been on?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess when I first landed here, I was a team leader. I was working for basically government. I got a really great job. It was amazing opportunity to connect and really push my edge. But what I realized at the beginning of that journey, it was only for a couple of years, is that there were things going on through the government, through the process of the system, that was out of integrity. I would have had to be out of integrity to pursue those pathways, those careers.
Right.
And I bumped into different things like, I bumped into, sorry, I've just got a mind blank. Total mind blank. All right.
That's all right.
So racism. That's the word I was looking for. Bumped into racism basically on all different levels here, which I felt, I'd never really experienced that because I'd never worked in government, I guess, back in Brisbane. But when I started experiencing that, it sort of started exposing the bigger picture a little bit more for me. When I was younger, I was a street artist. I was a graffiti artist. So I did see things from a different perspective as an artist already. I didn't pursue that at this stage because I actually had a core belief that I'd gained from my father, that I couldn't make a living from art. And this was a core belief because he was a graphic artist.
Right.
Quite a successful one in Sydney. And so I learned a lot from him. I watched him a lot, and I sat with him and just watched what he did for many years. And that's what really created the deep interest in art for me and expressing. And my mother was also an art teacher, and she's a school teacher as well. So, I think I had those skills, but I actually didn't pursue them because I thought the system wants me to do this. The system wants me to be a mechanic, be in civil construction and do all these things. And I found myself one day here shoveling sand into a backhoe, basically, into the scoop of a backhoe.
Yep.
And I looked around, and there was, a few meters away, there was a 60-year-old man, and he was shoveling sand as well. And in that moment, I just looked and I said, every day that I say yes to this, I'm saying yes to being that man. I'm saying yes to being a 65-year-old man doing the same thing. And I realized that I had to take action. I realized that this wasn't the real honey for me. It wasn't the real juice that I was looking for. It wasn't. And I asked myself the question, if I won $2 million that night, would I go back to work tomorrow? And the answer was no. And then that led me down 6 months, actually, of inquiring into what is this? What's the answer to that question? What will I do the next day after I'm rich? Money's not an issue. All these things. I'm economically safe and sound. And tattooing was it. Tattooing is what came up, and I guess having those foundations from my parents that really aligned me. I was quite good at illustrative drawing at that point.
Yep.
I'd done it on and off throughout my life, not while I was addicted, I'd say, to drugs and alcohol. Although I was a street artist, and I was definitely doing that up until I was about 25 still. But it wasn't that sort of higher form of art that I wanted to practice, essentially. And tattooing brought me, it brought me freedom, which was a big thing.
Yep.
It brought me freedom. It brought me into a place of expression. It also brought me into a place where I could connect with people.
Yeah.
And so through the tattooing process, there's really been a lot of revealing for me. It's been a really primary part of my healing and my resilience to leave addiction behind. When I became a tattoo artist, that's when which was about 6 years ago or 5 years ago, I actually quit drinking and I quit doing drugs. And so my whole first year of tattooing, essentially, I was sober, and I had to be sober because I couldn't rock up to work and tattoo with a hangover.
No.
And so I was just putting myself in that position of, responsibility. Like, as a tattoo artist, I feel very, very responsible in the process of tattooing, and having that responsibility has allowed me to heal in many other ways. Which has been quite powerful. So now, I went through 4 years of working in a shop, in a tattoo shop. Yep. The leap from civil construction to tattooing, that was scary. That was like, I'm getting $2,000 paycheck every week. I'm outside, I'm getting physical, I'm being a man, I'm doing all these things, doing, what a perceived man should do. And leaving that and taking that leap was definitely the scary part, because I went from, $1,800 a week to earning $100 a week, and I was back on the dole.
Yeah.
And I was tattooing once a week, probably at nighttime. I wasn't really being taught how to tattoo. It's something I had to really dig for. I had to start meeting people. I had to ask questions. I had to put myself in that position. And I had to give up my social life. I had to give up, as I said, drinking and partying, but I also just didn't have time anymore. It was like, what are you doing on the weekend? Oh, I'm drawing. I'm drawing all weekend. And so that was my life for a couple of years. And, I did relapse after that. I ended up in a relationship that was a trauma bond. And throughout that, tattooing was really important. It really helped me. It was the anchor, I would say, as I was sitting in the chaotic ocean, in the massive swells of unearthing trauma and going back into addiction. Tattooing was my consistent connection. So, yeah.
So where's that? So where's that look like for you now? Because I mean, we know we did Unleash a couple of years ago, right? So you've spoken to the last now. So obviously you started 6 years ago, got back into the drugs and alcohol, or the alcohol at least. Was Unleashed the barrier that sort of then reformed you or changed how you went about things, or is it prior to that? What did that look like?
Yeah, so I went from, I think I'd broken up from that relationship that I mentioned. So I really was in a relationship that, we both had a lot of unhealed trauma that came out really quickly and really intensely for us both to face. And that looked like me turning to addiction. I basically, about a year after that, I went down. I had got physically sick from that, from different trauma in that relationship. So I was physically ill. I was spiritually broken in a lot of ways at that point. I felt very disconnected, and I actually was referred by my sister to Man Cave with Preston Smiles. So I decided at some point just after my healing, when I numbed a little bit, enough for me to deal with the pain of I'm by myself, I need to do the work. I went to Bali actually, and I did a 7-day fast up in the jungle. And I literally had an exorcism. I would say if there's anything that's an exorcism, this experience was. And it was like, it looked like me completely seizing up, sweating profusely, almost fainted. And this was removing food from my life, for those 7 days, removing that ability to escape my emotions through eating. And that really healed me. That really shifted things. My body started healing then. I understood my emotions, all the trapped pain that I was in, all those things. And probably about 6 months after that is when I actually was introduced to Man Cave. So I'd been through that healing. I was sober for about 7 months. And I said to myself one day, I was like, I've been here before, I've quit for 7 months before. And then I went back. So what am I doing wrong? There's something else. There's a big void here. What is it? And then Man Cave dropped in, and I took that leap. I heard about it, and the next day I signed up, and I said, you know what? I'm fucking all in. I'm there. There's, these other options, these other ways, they're not working. So let's give it a shot. Let's give it a crack. And that was the start of it. So I actually did Man Cave, and that was 4 months. Lots of unpacking, lots of just being seen, really, and experiencing men's work in a pretty profound way. I actually am very well connected to a lot of those men still, in that same way that we are from Unleash. And it was about 4 months after the end of that, I believe, that Unleash happened. And I was like, all right, let's go do this in person now. Like, let's give it a shot. And I was actually in Central Australia, and I drove across to Brisbane. I drove for 2 days straight, and I got there, like the day before or something. And then I got a mate from school to come. I actually asked my mate Matt to come along. And that was really healing for both of us and for him. And so that was how I ended up there. And it was very confronting to go from doing that work online, on the phone, on a Zoom call, to being in a room with men, and and doing it sober. doing it clean, doing it sober, and there's no escape from that. So that was very confronting and very real. And and that's how we connected. Yeah.
How we connected. And there was no escaping in that room for that 2 days,
It was,
for sure. There was nowhere to escape at all. From the first moment you walked in, you were
absolutely.
Let's literally
I love
just
what
say
you said about the unconditional love when we walked in, because you're so right there. Like, when I think about, I can still see myself walking in, and that process of walking in. And once I was inside that container, it was like I could have had a tantrum. Anything could have happened. I could have, flipped my wig, and I still feel like men would have loved me. Men still would have gone, I see you. I love you. What's happening here? Like, what's happening underneath this? And that's really a whole shift in being, isn't it? Like,
I think you used the words earlier about being met, being met where you're at, but, someone being understander and hold that for you, and just being seen and being met, and you being able to go, blah, like a number of did.
Yeah.
And someone else going, yeah, cool. I love you.
Yeah.
And that's all we come back. Cool. Thanks for that. Thanks for the courage. And we love you. It's like,
yeah.
What about, no, that doesn't matter. Like, we just love you. And it's like, oh God, how refreshing is this place to be in?
Yeah, we're still here and we love you. Absolutely.
So what does it look like for you? So, I love tattoos. Like, I've got a few myself, and absolutely, when I get an opportunity to, I know I'll be up in Darwin, but if there's an opportunity to me either to get Alice or Darwin, I am trying to work it, that I spend, maybe a week out of the Alice Springs office. And if we can make that happen, then you and I will be talking about what tattoo I'm going to get.
Awesome. But, I'm down.
Because the reason why I say that is there's consciousness now that's going into that. Like, I would be getting that tattoo. It'd be calling in for me what that is, but in the conversation with you, it'd be like, what's calling in for you as well. So you did the tattooing, we've done Unleash, you're now a couple of years beyond that. How you see that now, and how you go about the process of working with men and women on the tattoos they give you, is that a different mindset that you're now coming from as well in how you go about, putting the body art onto that person?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good question. It's changed a lot. It's definitely changed from the beginning of my journey into tattooing to where I am now. I was working in a shop before. I hadn't done a lot of the work, I would say, that I've done now, obviously. And so what that looks like is really being that whole process being also a very conscious connection as to why the person's getting this tattoo, what they're getting, what it'll symbolize, and also creating timeless, within that framework, it's like creating something that's timeless, because it really speaks to each person's story. It speaks to their either an experience that they've walked through, that they've walked out of the other side of, or a journey they're just beginning, or a stage in their life, a statement to themselves, a value, a symbol of a value that they're imbuing. So there's all these, and I call the process intentional tattooing, because I really feel like that's what it is. It's sitting down with my client and discussing what the intention is to that process. And it's writing that down, and it's really keeping that as a part of the context of the space of the whole process. And so stepping out on my own was really a crucial part of embracing that more. Working in a tattoo shop, I've seen people come in, and once you've started healing your own trauma, and once you've started really going there, you can sense other people's, you can feel other people's, because, I'm more in touch with my intuition now. I'm more in touch with my body. And so using that as an instrument, I use that to navigate tattooing in that way. And when I was working in a tattoo shop, you know, people would come in and they just want they want tattoos slapped all over their body, you know. Yeah, I'll just have that, whatever looks cool. And, you know, these things can be fads. These things can be passing thoughts that have been imprinted by a catalog that you saw yesterday, or a picture you've seen on Pinterest. So trying to step away from those, I guess, surface level imprints, and really go a bit deeper. Yeah.
That's beautiful, man.
That's
I absolutely love that, because the one thing that I'm learning more and more of is that everything we do, like I'm really now getting heavily into, you know, and if people listen to the episodes of the podcast, I'll see what my latest trend or fad is, whatever you want to talk about. But I think it's more the deepness of where I'm going. I'm really now into vibration, energy, and consciousness is where my current view is around this connecting to one global consciousness, which has got its own set of levels of, you know, attractor fields, vibrations, you know. And yes, I'm calling from specific books to use that terminology, but it's great because someone else described it for me. But everything I do is with intention. So, you know, to the point of cooking, like if I'm in a really funny, bad, shitty mood, or something's just happened, or I'm feeling a bit down, and I'm actually chopping up all those vegetables and I'm creating something, I'm actually creating a low energy meal. Like I've taken my energy, transformed the positive energy from those vegetables, and actually then I'm feeding my family this low intention food. But if I go, okay, I've closed the door on my work day and I'm now downstairs and I'm actually saying, hey, I'm really going to enjoy creating this nice curry, or, you know, this nice rice dish or whatever else. And I'm really going to say, this is all about nutrition and being nutritious and something we're going to enjoy as a family. Then the intention is coming from a much higher level. And therefore that's going into all the food and everything else we're eating. And then that goes into our bodies. So for me, tattooing is exactly in the same realm. Like if the person tattooing me is coming from they're an angry, frustrated, you know, person, or who's really struggling, or they've got addictions, but they're doing this on the side, you know, or they're coming from this low vibe, then they're putting that into me. But someone like yourself is saying, no, I want to understand, like, what's the energy that we're connecting with, and the intention that we're doing this with is from the place of love and goodness. But when it stays with you, it stays with you at that vibration level.
Totally.
And it's
Absolutely
totally connected with you. And so, you know, anything I have moving forward that's where I want to have moving forward, is to go, did I and the tattoo artists that I worked with have the same intention? And did we even, to a degree, sit down and actually vibe about the positivity about what's about to take place, and then allow that to happen? Which is why I'd want to get one from you, because I know that we would easily have that, like, you know, we would have that viewpoint and that connection. So the fact that you're offering that without your clients necessarily knowing that is such a positive thing for them anyway, because you're already putting that energy into that artwork that they're going to then carry away with them. So that's beautiful.
Thank you, bro. Thank you. Yeah, I love what you said about food and the intention, you know, choosing high, you know, foods with higher light frequencies as well, like food with more light. And the importance of the gut, wow, like, is so crucially important. And, you know, some people regarding, you know, tattoos, some people, it's sort of like, and reading the space and the intention of the person. Some people only want to go to a certain depth, and that's cool. It's just about creating that safe space for them and wherever they're at to be met in that process. And I think, you know, having that really controlled sacred space has changed a lot of people's relationships to their tattoos. Yes. You know, some people have been tattooed for years, and then they've come to this point where they're like, all I want is something that's really meaningful. I want something that's much deeper. And so they've changed the way that they're being tattooed, which is really profound as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the culture's changing in Australia, so it's a really positive thing for tattooing as a whole, as well as a community. So
Yeah, no, look, absolutely. I'm aware of the time, and that we've had an absolutely awesome conversation. I I could ask a whole lot of questions, but I feel that there's another 45 minutes, an hour. I actually want to really I want to get you back on. It'll probably be next season, so in
okay.
2022, because I really want to
Awesome.
then talk more into what you've spoken about, like the all connection in with the First Nations, the mobs around Central Australia,
Yeah.
that connection of you, how that aligns in with your tattooing, how that aligns with how you live, how you're working with them to become more grounded and more connected to country,
Yeah.
because that's an area I'm so just deeply fascinated by now and deeply want to step into.
Mm,
We ourselves are about to move down to the beach, which is really nice, a place called Ocean Grove. In fact, by the time this comes out, we would have been down there. And I know that there's some
yeah.
Indigenous people down there do some amazing artwork in the sand and then, using drones to take photos. But I want to
Wow.
try to connect him with those people and start to learn more about, that the culture of that area, of that mob.
Yeah.
Because, all the mobs are different on their culture and how they live, although they are all connected, but they do have different backgrounds and ways of doing things. So yeah,
Yeah.
so I definitely want to get you back on because I think there's a whole lot of stuff that we could talk into, and particularly your viewpoint, from a white man's perspective, what
Mm,
you're seeing from what you agree with, what you're disagreeing with, what you're seeing, how the governments
mm,
are acting, as you talked a bit about racism that we didn't really get a chance to touch on to.
mm,
But I
mhm.
really want to talk into a bit of that as well, because I
Yeah.
still feel that we have this we just have this underlying view as if they could just go away, we'd all be happy. And I'm like, that's so fucked. But anyway, as
Yeah.
I said,
Yeah.
I think it's another.
I'd love to talk more about that for sure. It's coming up often for me. It's coming up quite prolifically, especially in the community with what's going on at the moment around, mandating vaccines, pushing vaccines, fracking. There's different things going on here in Central Australia, and I guess I just want to send a message now to anyone listening, like, to reach out locally and find out, what language group is is still living in your area. What language group of Indigenous people? I know here it's Aranda people, and we're making a real intentional effort here to connect the white fellas. We're going out to country where we're learning, we're listening, we're relating on another level. So I really, invite everyone to find out what land you're living on relative to Indigenous people, and really dive into that, and start going locally and, approaching Indigenous people and finding out who the elders are and how you can help support them, because they have been treated in a very unjust way, and I know we've been lied to massively. And if anyone wants to come here to Central Australia, feel free to reach out to me as well. There is mob up north that I'm close friends with, and they're actually looking for tradesmen, for people to come out and start projects and start sharing their skills, and in return they will share their culture, they will share their stories and their song. So just put that out there now. Yeah.
Thanks, Hayden. That's beautiful. I think that's an awesome offer. With me working now for the Northern Territory Power Water Corporation, one of the things that I've spoken openly with my management team about is that I want a two-way mentoring program to take place. Whereas if there are, people from the northern mobs that want to actually, learn about corporate world or come and get involved in how that operates, but are unsure, I want them to come in because I can mentor them on how to, survive in the corporate world on the basis that they mentor us about the mob's culture and the language and country and what takes place there. It's a two-way street. And I want them to be able to go, I can operate and I can make money off this beast that's not going away. And that's the problem. This materialistic beast of a corporate world is not leaving. How can you leverage it, but train up everyone else around you and actually do that in cooperation? So we learn about what the impact we're having, but learn from the culture. But I can actually teach you, rather than, if something's not going to go away, the best way to put it in a different sense, people talk about all the issues with banks and fees and everything else, right? Go and buy stocks. You can argue against it, but you might as well jump on and buy stocks and make some money out of it at the same time, right? So same thing, like if this corporate beast isn't going to go away, how can you leverage off it financially? But how can you then be within the system to actually influence the system and help people understand from within the system the impact that's actually happening and take place? So that's something I'm really keen to do as well. So
awesome.
I can, I can do it down here in Victoria, but when I'm up there, I really want to be able to say, how do we bring these people in? And we're in the mode of working out which people we want to bring in. And I'm going to be extremely adamant that we have to be finding these people, and we'll have to work out how to pay for them, but it doesn't matter. It's so important for us to do it.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, if you need any help with that, finding people, I definitely have a lot of relationships in Central Oz. So if I can help in any way, just let me know.
Man. I'll definitely reach out. One thing I like to do to close out of the podcast is just ask my guests to, if there's a message that they would like to leave, for people listening in, the men listening in, or the women that have got men in their lives listening, what would be a message that you would put out to those men that, they might be able to have a bit of a takeaway?
Yeah, I think the message for the men is really to feel it, to allow space, to let yourself feel, allow space for the potentiality of who you are to come forth, who you truly are to come forth, outside of the imprints, outside of the institutional imprints, outside of, societal expectations. Really create that space for yourself to feel, and also just laugh. Don't take anything personally. That's the other thing. It's a divine comedy, this universe, and really allow your body to feel that humor as well as the sadness. The levels that you're willing to feel sadness are the same levels you're willing to, express that deep sense of happiness. So, that's really my message for everyone.
Thanks, man. I actually really love that last one about, it's a divine comedy. And it really is. We can exactly choose. We can see it as a sad thing or as an actually quite a comedic thing, and just laugh at some of the stuff that's going on. So, this has been a beautiful conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I'll let you get back up to, I know you drove down to find a better location, but I'll let you get back up to that telegraph station and go and find a bit of green grass and check it out. It's been beautiful. I've loved reconnecting with you again. I look forward to our chats that we have every 3 weeks with you and Steve. It fills my cup on that regular basis, which I really enjoy. So take care, have a beautiful day, and look after yourself, my brother.
Thanks so much, Milvo. Cheers, brother.
Cheers,
all
man.
The best.
Thanks, man. So that was the Hayden Williams from episode 44 of The Unearthed Man. What a great little story. And as I said, I definitely want to get Hayden back on because he's now doing a lot of fantastic work with the tribes and the mobs through Central and North Australia. And I think there's a whole lot of stuff, as you've probably picked up over the last few episodes, that we just need to unpack in Australia and actually start to be honest and open and truthful about what's really going on here. So he's had an amazing journey, and it's great to see where Hayden's landed now. I think he's in such a beautiful space, and I look forward to being constantly connecting with him and, between he and I and others, just holding each other to account to make sure that we maintain our truth and we are living our truthful lives, and that we're actually laughing at the divine comedy that is around us on every given day. So for those looking to find me, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, just look up The Unearthed Man. That's it for episode 44. Have a beautiful day. Sending you much love and care. Milvo.